Coming up today on the Prosperity Nation podcast.
If you don't keep up your house.
Keep up the house and, you need a lot of repairs and stuff. I mean, you might not want to deal with it, but when the homeowner passes, it's the kids, it's the grandkids, it's everyone else who has to now figure out all this stuff.
Welcome to the Prosperity Nation podcast. I'm Angie.
And I'm Elise.
And we're so glad that you're here with us. And I probably shouldn't be so cheery because we're talking about money and death today. I should tone this down. But that's part of what we want you to do is to start talking about money. And, we'll talk today about death and money and being prepared for that and what happens, when you die or a spouse die or a kid dies, whatever. There's preparations that can make things easier. So we're going to head into that episode. And this episode is pretty dear to my heart because, I'm dealing with my dad who passed away about 6 months ago, and now I'm helping my mom through things. And so we've been on a big journey trying to sort everything out. And literally this weekend but the last 2 weeks have been, cleaning out her property and getting it ready for sale. And I've learned so many lessons going through this. So I thought, let's talk about it on the podcast.
That's great. I know I've witnessed through texting what you've been going through. It's crazy, but I feel like, there's so many people who've experienced really similar things in their own way. Yeah. So it's not uncommon.
Yeah, exactly. Just to dive right into it, there's a lot of elements of money when it comes to death. There's debt, there's assets, there's bank accounts, there's inheritances and all of that. But in this particular thing that was really eye-opening for me is what happens to your assets when one of your spouses, let's say your parents in this case, one of the parents passes away and the other person can't handle all of the assets. And it doesn't matter if it's a house or maybe it's houses and maybe it's boats and cars and, big things or small things. But, if your parents are aging, then, one probably can't handle it on their own. And two, the point that I discovered on this was that actually neither one of them were handling their assets well for a while. They were behind in their maintenance on the property and stuff. And so it just became this overwhelming amount of, I kept calling it deferred maintenance. It was deferred maintenance. Deferred to me.
It's the accountant in you, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Did I put that on the balance sheet? Amortize it? Yeah, exactly. Right. Oh my gosh. Well, can you relate? I mean, I don't know if you understand what that's like with having to deal with someone's property after they've died, but man, it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very close friend whose mom passed away unexpectedly, very unexpected. She was in her mid-50s, so, no known health issues. And he was the oldest of kin, I guess. She was divorced, had been divorced for many years. And he just went through a nightmare she didn't have a will, So it was a nightmare trying to figure out her bank accounts and what was going to happen in the Social Security that she was getting and just all these pieces, and it was almost like at one point, I think he gave up. He's like, whatever she has, it's not much. It's not worth how much time this is taking me, to go to, the court or wherever and bring my birth certificate and do all this stuff. It's like, and
to prove that he was the
son,
the heir. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so challenging. And, it really reinforced to me how important having kind of the organization in place of what is going to happen, to the assets, like you said, or whether it's bank accounts or anything,
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's one situation was where a husband passed away and, the wife was left with a lot of credit card debt. The husband had not been communicating with his wife about their true financial situation. And instead of communicating about it and working together as a team, just kept opening credit cards. And so, she didn't know what was there, how bad the situation was. And and then didn't know how to deal with any of it. And then having to have, family come in and start opening mail and start sorting out, what is all this? Well, how much money do you have coming in? And what is your Social Security going to be now that he's gone? Because that changes a lifestyle a lot when a spouse dies and they're on Social Security. That really does cut their income in nearly half often. And, at that time, if you're not communicating and you're not talking about what's going to happen, it could really put a burden on the people that are surviving you.
Yeah. Well, like you said, even just with your deferred maintenance.
Yeah. Right.
Like if the house isn't upkept. Upkept? I don't know.
Yeah, upkept. If you don't keep up your house.
You don't keep up the house and, you need a lot of repairs and stuff. I mean, you might not want to deal with it, but when, the homeowner passes, it's the kids, it's the grandkids, it's everyone else who has to now figure out all this stuff and put in their own money or time, into fixing it.
Yeah, exactly. And, my dad had passed away 6 months or so ago. And, my mom wasn't going to deal with all his stuff. A lot of the stuff on the property and stuff was his, but she couldn't handle it. A garage full of stuff and tools and machinery and, all of the things that she probably never even, went out and got involved in anyway. So it was really up to either she was going to pass away and then we were going to have to do it, or in this case, we were able to move her into a simpler lifestyle, but we still had to deal with it all in order to put her house up for sale. And the one thing that was, I was thinking about this topic all week as I was, shoveling stuff into the trailer. But I had to get a power of attorney for my mom because I thought, well, gosh, if we're in the middle of an escrow and, she falls or something happens and she's in the hospital, our escrow would just get stopped. And I thought, you know what? I need to start planning with her and start having money conversations with mom and helping her in that way. And I didn't realize it until it kind of fell that way. Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing, we're talking about it and it just sounds like, yeah, obviously, it's important to have those things and ducks in a row and wills. But why do you think people don't?
Oh, I think it's very, I was going to say, honestly, it's complex. It's hard to understand. What is a will? What is a trust? But actually, it's not that.
I mean, can you just write on a piece of paper? If I die, give my blah to blah. I mean, I know every bank account I have and every life insurance policy or whatever, it asks who my beneficiaries are. That in itself, I feel like at least will handle half of it, But I feel like so often people don't have this organized or set up or thought about. And, it's not the complexity really, because, you could write it on a napkin or have a notary come over and do it on that, whatever. And, if you wrote it, then there it is. But the harder part is having to think about it and make the decisions. Well, wait a minute, I really should give all my assets to all my kids because I love all my kids. I don't care that Johnny is a, drug addict or thief in jail for prison for 10 years. I still love Johnny and I want him to have half. And, I wouldn't want to be unfair. And what if you're married and you have stepkids that you've, lived with for 20 or 30 years or raised or are part of your family? Then how do you manage that? So I think the harder part of all of it is confronting those decisions. It's not about the paperwork, but it's, you have, as parents, you have this guilt. You want to just give everything equally, or maybe you don't, you want to cut one out, but you don't want to tell that person, So that's what stalls it all. It's just being honest about that and then figuring that out. And it's easier to just avoid and just leave their stuff and let the kids deal with it, after you die. Do you think there's an aspect of it also not wanting to actually confront that is a possibility? Because I know death is obviously a really scary topic. And so I think going to that step of let's get a will and let's figure out what we're doing with all of our stuff is now oh my God, I'm actually going to die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it might not be for many, many years, but I think people don't want to think about that, but it's unfortunately true. And, and too many friends, and I'd like to admit, have had situations where loved ones, spouses, parents, kids died unexpectedly at any age. So it's like, it really reinforces how important it is for anyone. If you have a bank account, if you have a home, if you own things, have some plan, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's hard to face, the fact that it's actually going to happen to you someday, even though we all know it. We don't want to really confront it. But I look at it too from the money side. But you also then have to list out your assets. You have to know what you have, and you have to know what you owe. And that goes back to our basic conversation we talk about all the time about confronting your money and being able to write a list of what do I own and what do I owe and what is going to happen to these things when I'm not here anymore. And it's very similar if you're going through divorce, or if you're going through a partnership split up, or, anything where you need to be able to assess what you have and what you owe, to sit down and write out your personal net worth statement, a list of all your assets and all your debts, is much harder for people than you would think. But it takes sitting down and actually going through it. And this is what we talk about all the time. Yeah. We get these messes and they don't know even what they own and what they have. And we go through and start cleaning it up and start finding accounts and finding debts that they didn't know. You have to be able to do that if you're going to answer the question, where are my assets going to go?
It just reminded me of something. Like, I had that same thought as you're saying. It's like the cleaning up. You got to clean up what you're dealing with to see what you have. And I don't know if I told you, but my grandma passed away, 10 plus years ago or something at this point. But I didn't live in the area. My mom and my sister helped clean the house out, and she was a bit of a hoarder, my grandma. So kind of like we do with accounting, they had to literally go through the rooms and clean everything out. I cannot even tell you how much cash they found. Oh my gosh. But to your point, they had to physically clean the house in order to find the cash, and it would be tucked away in pockets of jackets and in shoe boxes. Like, they could not, they're just like, here's a jacket and throw it away. No, they had to check. It was like tens and tens of thousands of dollars, not just like a few $100.
Oh my gosh. I hope my mom and my dad didn't do that. Mom, plug your ears for a minute. Because we weren't going through pockets. We were going through throwing that in the back of the trailer, We had so much volume of cleanup to do that there was no way we were going to sort through everything. It was so much. Right. And that goes back to, a little different topic, but just having that responsibility over your stuff, and like, you're responsible for all this stuff you accumulate over life. And when you die or you get injured, even if you're young and you get injured, who's going to handle all this stuff? And if you're just storing, bringing stuff in, like your example of hoarding, maybe it's not even hoarding, but, maybe you were into doing some hobby, some art for years. So you've got all these art room full of supplies, but you haven't touched it in 10 years. Like, that's your responsibility to handle that. If you don't, then who's going to clean that up for you? It's another situation, before I've also had to clean up for my other dad's house when my stepmom, she broke her femur actually, and she was his caregiver. And they wanted to stay in the house and he wanted to stay in the house until they physically could not. And we had to emergency move them out and emergency pack the whole entire house and get it into boxes so that they can move into assisted living. And I was like, what do we do with all this art stuff? What do we do with all these pictures? What do we do with all these boats and trikes and, things that my dad had saved and the things that she had saved? And, we didn't want to make those decisions for them. We wanted them to make those decisions, but they deferred and delayed it for so long that it was kind of put on us to have to figure it out. And that was a burden.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I know, and what's sad is I know, the deceased, I guess, they don't want that.
Right.
Like, that's not something that anyone that I know wants to put on their loved ones when they pass. But it unfortunately is what happens if it's not being taken care of.
Exactly. That's so true because, as we age, one of the purposes of retirement planning is so that you don't have to be a burden on your family. And I know everybody wants that. And oftentimes that can happen and they're not a burden with money until it comes to the stuff. And I'm kind of lumping the stuff, the material things into the money, but really we go and we spend money on things. Well, where do those things go? They go in your front yard and your garage and your spare bedrooms, in your guest room. Right. What are you going to do with them? If you're responsible for bringing them into your house, you're responsible for taking them out of your house too. Now, I know that I have a unique point of view on all of this because I am totally fine with getting rid of everything and living in 2 suitcases, traveling around the world for years. I've done that and I can do it at any time. I'm not attached to the things in my house. I can have them or I cannot have them, either way. But what I do know is that if something were to happen to me right now, I will have 3 houses because I've got stuff in LA, I've got stuff in San Francisco, and I've got stuff in Northern California. I've got three furnished places that somebody's going to have to deal with that stuff. And it's going to probably be my kids or my grandkids, unfortunately. So, I need to have a plan too. Same. I guess that's my point.
I don't have one. I know. I'm like, oh, great. I need to figure out what my life insurance is, what's happening with that and all my other stuff. I know.
Now that's our homework,
Guilty.
Right? I mean, we're talking about we never had a plan for the stuff. We got a plan for our assets and our IRAs and all this stuff. But what about the physical stuff? Yeah. There's a service in LA and I think San Francisco I think the app is called Lug, and you hire luggers. So it's like Uber for moving yourself, moving stuff. So okay, I'm going to put a will. Please hire Lug to come lug my stuff.
If they're still around by that time.
Yeah, right.
What if they're not? Now you have problems.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you're thinking that I'm going to have a very long future.
I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the thing. You never know. You just never know.
Yeah.
And so it's important to have a plan at any age, honestly.
Exactly. And, you brought up another topic, which is life insurance. And, life insurance, IRA accounts, if you've gotten divorced or you've split up in life, sometimes those things still have the beneficiary to your old family or to your ex. Yep. So it's important to check on those every once in a while. Make sure that they're going to go where you want them to go too.
Yeah, I think any savings account I know that I've opened generally has a beneficiary. So yeah, I think it's important to check them annually, maybe, just every year or two, even you said, if life changes. Especially major life changes. Yeah. Well, there's certain assets that don't go through probate, and probate is where the court decides basically where your assets go. And by having a will and a trust and having it laid out, you avoid that probate so that it goes where your trust says it's going to go and where your will says it's going to go. But certain assets don't have to go through that, like your retirement accounts and your life insurance, where they do have those named beneficiaries on the accounts. So if you don't have a lot of assets and that's all you have is a life insurance policy, and you have a retirement account or something like that, then it could be really simple. Just put the beneficiaries and you're done. But when you have houses and multiple houses and businesses and rentals and multiple brokerage accounts and multiple IRA accounts and life insurance policies and life insurance trust and advanced plans, it gets quite complex. And so it is important to understand, not just from a tax perspective, what's happening with your estate, but what burden is it going to be on your spouse when you go? Do you want your wife to be burdened with all this stuff that's in your head because you pass away and you didn't communicate it, or vice versa, or your kids, right? That's the whole point. Sometimes I feel like they don't even know what they have. Mm-hmm. And I think that's obviously the hardest part. So even just organizing, these are all the accounts I have.
Yeah. So I think that's the homework I would say for everybody. We all have to go do is not just list all your assets and list all your debts and get it organized so you know what you have, but take a look around you. Look around your house, your garage, your yard, your cars, your toys, and just ask yourself, if you're not using these things anymore, can you start moving them now, getting rid of them now, selling them, whatever you want, wherever you want them to go. But take an honest look, because that stuff is a burden on whoever's going to have to move it after if something happens to you. So I encourage you to take a look, not just at your finances, but at everything you own, and say, wait, is there something I should be handling now instead of waiting? That's my challenge.
I love it. And as always, we want to hear from you. So we want to hear, if you accepted the challenge, how you did with it.
Yep.
Any other stories you have, what you found, what you maybe embarrassingly found. Any questions you have. We'd love
Any
to
money
hear it all.
you found in the pockets. You can send it our way.
Shoebox, everything. Please share with us. And as always, it's stories@prosperitynation.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media and like and subscribe our podcast.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing from you. See you next time.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us today. Follow us on social media for the latest episodes, updates, and more. Like and subscribe to videos from us on YouTube and find out more at prosperitynation.com. That's it for now. We'll see you next time on the Prosperity Nation podcast.